Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, squinting at the dying light filtering through the grimy windows of his repair shop. The day had been long, filled with broken hover cars and malfunctioning atmosphere processors that kept the small mining colony of Kepler 442b running. As the only qualified mechanic on this remote world, he rarely had time to rest. The colony sat on the edge of explored space, a collection of prefab buildings and mining equipment scattered across a barren landscape of red dirt and jagged rocks. Most people here were either desperate for work or running from something. Marcus fell into the first category. After losing his family in the Earth-Mars War, he had taken the first transport ship to anywhere that would have him. A strange sound echoed from outside his shop, cutting through the usual hum of generators and air recyclers. It was high-pitched, almost like crying, but with an odd harmonic quality that made his teeth ache. Marcus paused, listening. The sound came again, weaker this time, filled with what could only be described as desperation. He grabbed his portable scanner and stepped outside into the thin air. The colony's atmosphere dome provided breathable air, but it always felt thin compared to Earth normal. The sound was coming from the direction of the old mining pits, about half a kilometer from the main settlement. Most colonists avoided that area after dark. Strange things happened there sometimes. Equipment would malfunction, and people reported seeing lights that shouldn't exist. Marcus followed the sound, his boots crunching on the loose gravel. The twin moons cast an eerie blue-green light over the landscape, creating long shadows between the abandoned mining equipment. As he got closer to the source, his scanner began picking up unusual energy readings. The device had been modified with Terran military hardware, capable of detecting everything from radiation to exotic matter signatures. The readings were unlike anything in his database. He found the source in a crater that had been blasted out years ago during the initial mining surveys. At the bottom, partially hidden behind a cluster of twisted metal and broken rock, was something that made him question his sanity. It was a creature, roughly the size of a large dog, but clearly not from any world humans had cataloged. Its body was serpentine yet powerful, with 4 legs ending in clawed feet. Most striking were the wings, delicate, translucent membranes that caught the moonlight like stained glass. The creature's scales were pure white, so pale they seemed to glow against the dark ground. But what made Marcus's heart ache was the state it was in. The creature was covered in what looked like thousands of small, dark growths. They clustered thickest around its joints and wing membranes, clearly causing pain. The thing, for lack of a better word, was crying. The sound he had heard was coming from this wounded animal, and there was an intelligence in those cries that spoke of more than simple pain. As Marcus approached, the creature's head lifted. Its eyes were the color of fresh snow, with pupils that dilated as they focused on him. For a moment, neither moved. Then, the creature tried to stand, its legs shaking with effort. The growths on its body became more visible in the scanner's light. They were some kind of parasitic organism, feeding off the creature's energy. Marcus had seen something similar once before, during his military service. Barnacle-like organisms that attached to ship hulls, but these were clearly adapted for living tissue. They pulsed with a faint bioluminescence, and his scanner registered them as actively draining the creature's life force. The creature collapsed again, too weak to remain upright. It looked at Marcus with those strange, intelligent eyes, and he could have sworn he saw hope in them. Hope that someone, finally, might help. "Easy there," Marcus said softly, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature didn't flee. If anything, it seemed to relax slightly at the sound of his voice. Marcus knelt beside it, careful not to make sudden movements. Up close, he could see that the creature was young, probably an infant or juvenile of its species. Its features had the soft, underdeveloped quality of youth, and its cries had the desperate quality of a lost child. Where were its parents? How had it ended up here, alone and dying? Marcus's scanner provided some answers. The creature was giving off trace amounts of exotic radiation, the kind associated with faster-than-light travel. But the readings were old, suggesting it had been here for weeks, maybe months. His device also detected traces of advanced alloys in the surrounding area. Pieces of technology far beyond human capability. A ship had crashed here, an alien ship. Marcus spent the next hour searching the area, finding more pieces of what had clearly been an advanced spacecraft. The metal was unlike anything he had ever seen. It seemed to shift and flow like liquid while maintaining structural integrity. His scanner identified over a dozen elements that weren't on the human periodic table. But there were no other life signs. No adult creatures, no bodies, nothing to suggest what had happened to the ship's crew. Just this small, dying creature covered in parasites. As dawn approached, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't leave the creature here to die. Whatever it was, wherever it had come from, it was suffering, and he had the skills to help. His medical training from his military days might be focused on humans, but anatomy was anatomy, and pain was universal. The creature seemed to sense his intent. When he gently lifted it, it didn't struggle. Instead, it pressed against his chest, seeking warmth and comfort. It was surprisingly light, probably due to the bone structure needed for flight, but he could feel the rapid beating of its heart against his hands. Getting back to his shop took time. The creature was weak, and Marcus had to stop frequently to let it rest. During these breaks, he studied it more carefully. The white scales were beautiful, each one perfectly formed despite the creature's condition. But it was the eyes that struck him most. There was definitely intelligence there, and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. His shop was equipped with a basic medical bay, intended for treating the inevitable injuries that came with dangerous mining work. Marcus laid the creature on the examination table and began a careful scan. His equipment wasn't designed for alien anatomy, but it could provide basic information about biological functions. The creature was definitely dying. The parasites were draining it faster than its body could produce energy. Its heart rate was irregular, and several organs showed signs of severe stress. If he was going to help, he had to act quickly. The first challenge was the parasites themselves. Under magnification, they were clearly artificial, some kind of bioengineered weapon designed to slowly kill their host. They had root-like tendrils that burrowed deep into tissue, making surgical removal extremely dangerous. But Marcus had an advantage that whoever had created these things probably hadn't counted on: human creativity and stubbornness. He spent hours studying the parasites, using every piece of equipment in his shop. Gradually, he began to understand their structure. They were designed to feed on a specific type of energy that the creature produced naturally. But they had a weakness. They couldn't process certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Marcus rigged up a modified welding laser, adjusting its frequency to target the parasite's cellular structure. It was delicate work, requiring steady hands and precise timing. One mistake could kill the creature he was trying to save. The first few parasites came off easily once their root systems were disrupted. The creature stirred as they detached, its breathing becoming slightly easier. Encouraged, Marcus continued the painstaking process of removing each parasite individually. Hours passed. His back ached from leaning over the table, and his eyes burned from the precision work. But gradually, the creature's condition improved. Its breathing steadied, its heart rate normalized, and some color returned to its pale scales. When Marcus finally removed the last parasite, the creature opened its eyes and looked directly at him. Then it did something that made his heart skip a beat. It spoke, not in words he could understand, but in a series of musical tones that clearly carried meaning. The sounds were beautiful, like a cross between singing and chiming bells. The creature was trying to communicate, trying to thank him. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. In all his years of military service and civilian life, he had never encountered anything so remarkable. This wasn't just an animal he had saved. This was a sentient being capable of thought and emotion. "You're welcome," he said softly, not sure if the creature could understand, but needing to respond somehow. The creature tried to sit up, its movements much steadier now. It looked around the shop with obvious curiosity, taking in the various machines and tools. Then it focused on Marcus again, tilting its head in a gesture that seemed remarkably human-like. As the day progressed, Marcus learned more about his unexpected patient. The creature was definitely intelligent, responding to simple gestures and showing clear problem-solving abilities. When Marcus offered it water, it sniffed it carefully before drinking, clearly analyzing whether it was safe. When he showed it various foods, it rejected most but showed interest in the high-energy protein bars he kept for emergency situations. Most remarkably, it began trying to mimic human speech. The creature would listen to Marcus talk, then attempt to reproduce the sounds with its own vocal apparatus. The results were musical rather than linguistic, but the intent was clear. By evening, the creature was strong enough to walk around the shop, though it stayed close to Marcus. It seemed fascinated by his work, watching intently as he repaired various pieces of equipment. When he accidentally dropped a wrench, the creature picked it up in its mouth and returned it to him. That night, as Marcus prepared to sleep on his shop's small cot, the creature curled up beside him. Its body radiated warmth, and its breathing had a musical quality that was oddly soothing. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus realized his life had just taken a turn towards something extraordinary. He had no idea how extraordinary it would become. Outside, hidden in the shadows of the mining equipment, sensors recorded everything. The parasites that had been removed weren't just weapons. They were also tracking devices. And somewhere in the depths of space, an alien intelligence had just learned that its lost weapon had been found. More importantly, it had learned that humans were capable of things that no other species in the galaxy had ever accomplished. The hunt was about to begin. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus found the creature, and his life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The small being, which he had started calling Snow, due to its pristine white scales, had recovered remarkably well. Its appetite had returned with a vengeance, and it had grown noticeably larger, now reaching Marcus's waist when standing on its hind legs. More importantly, Snow was learning to communicate. Marcus discovered that the creature's musical language was incredibly complex, with subtle variations in pitch, rhythm, and harmonic overtones conveying different meanings. Snow had begun incorporating human sounds into its repertoire, creating a unique hybrid language that only the two of them understood. Marcus, Snow would sing in the mornings, a melodious combination of human phonetics and alien musical tones that never failed to make Marcus smile. In return, Marcus had learned to recognize several of Snow's emotional states through its vocalizations. Happiness sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Curiosity resembled the plucking of harp strings, and contentment was a low, rumbling purr that vibrated through the creature's entire body. The colony's residents had mixed reactions to Snow's presence. Some were fascinated, others fearful. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the colony's chief medical officer, had been initially skeptical, but became increasingly intrigued as she observed the creature's obvious intelligence and Marcus's remarkable success in treating its condition. "I've never seen anything like it," she admitted during one of her visits to Marcus's shop. "The healing rate is extraordinary, and the way it interacts with you suggests cognitive abilities that rival human intelligence." Governor Harrison, the colony's administrator, was less enthusiastic. A thin, nervous man who saw potential problems in everything. He worried about the legal and safety implications of harboring an unknown alien species. "What if its people come looking for it?" he asked during a heated meeting in his office. "What if they think we're holding it prisoner? This could spark an interstellar incident." "Then we explained that we rescued it," Marcus replied calmly. Any species intelligent enough for space travel should understand the concept of medical aid. But Marcus had his own concerns, ones he hadn't shared with anyone else. His deep space communication equipment had been picking up strange signals for the past week, brief, encrypted transmissions that didn't match any known human or alien protocols. Something was out there, searching. Snow seemed to sense it too. The creature had become increasingly restless, often standing at the shop's windows and staring up at the star-filled sky with an expression that Marcus had learned to recognize as longing mixed with fear. One evening, as Marcus worked on repairing a damaged atmosphere processor, Snow approached him carrying a piece of metal in its mouth. It wasn't just any metal. It was a fragment from the alien ship, one of the pieces Marcus had collected from the crash site. Snow placed the fragment on Marcus's workbench and began a complex series of vocalizations, accompanied by gestures toward the ceiling. The meaning was clear. Snow was trying to tell him about the ship, about what had happened. Marcus put down his tools and gave Snow his full attention. The creature settled beside him and began what could only be described as a story, told through sound and movement. The musical narrative was heartbreaking. Through Snow's emotional tones and expressive gestures, Marcus pieced together a tale of family, loss, and abandonment. Snow's people had been fleeing something terrible, a great darkness that consumed worlds. Their ship had been damaged, perhaps by the same entities that had attached the parasites to Snow. The adult dragons had made a desperate decision. Rather than risk their young one's life in whatever battle awaited them, they had hidden Snow on this remote world, hoping to return when the danger passed. But something had gone wrong. The parasites were meant to slowly weaken Snow, making it easier for their enemies to track and capture. Instead, the creatures who had planted the parasites had found the adult dragons first. Snow's song became a lament of such profound sadness that Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. The creature was alone in the universe, its family gone, its people scattered or destroyed. The only home it had known was here, in a grease-stained repair shop with a human mechanic who had stumbled across it by accident. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, reaching out to gently stroke Snow's head. "I'm so sorry." Snow leaned into his touch, its own version of tears, crystalline droplets that sparkled like diamonds, falling from its pale eyes. But then the creature did something remarkable. It began singing again, but this time the song was different. It spoke of new beginnings, of found family, of hope discovered in the darkest places. Snow was choosing to stay, choosing to make a new life with Marcus. The moment was interrupted by an urgent alarm from Marcus's communication system. An incoming transmission, origin unknown, using frequencies that shouldn't exist. Marcus hesitated, then activated the receiver. The voice that came through was unmistakably alien, speaking in harmonious tones similar to Snow's language, but with an undertone of menace that made Marcus's skin crawl. Snow's reaction was immediate and terrifying. The creature let out a sound unlike anything Marcus had heard before, a primal scream of fear and rage that shattered 2 windows and overloaded several electronic systems. Snow's scales, usually pristine white, began shifting to a deep, angry red. The transmission continued for several more seconds before cutting off abruptly. Snow remained in its defensive posture, wings spread wide, claws extended, every muscle tense for battle. "They found us," Marcus said quietly, understanding flowing through him like ice water. "Your enemies. They're coming." Snow turned to him, and in those pale eyes Marcus saw a complexity of emotions. Fear for its own safety, but more importantly, terror for his. The creature was more afraid of what might happen to Marcus than what might happen to itself. That's when Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt Snow, human, alien, or otherwise. "We need to prepare," he said, moving to his secure storage locker. His military training was coming back, along with skills he'd hoped never to use again. If they want to fight, they'll get one. Over the next few hours, Marcus transformed his repair shop into something resembling a fortress. He activated defensive systems he'd installed, but never expected to use: electromagnetic shields, automated defense turrets, and a communications jammer that would make them harder to track. Snow watched with fascination as Marcus worked. The creature seemed to understand that these were preparations for war, and it began contributing in its own way. Snow's breath, Marcus discovered, wasn't just hot air. It was some kind of plasma that could melt through solid metal in seconds. Together, they created firing ports in the shop's walls and reinforced critical systems. Dr. Rodriguez arrived as they were finishing their preparations, her medical bag in one hand and a military-grade pulse rifle in the other. "I heard the transmission," she said grimly. Half the colony's electronics went haywire when Snow screamed. "Whatever's coming, it's not friendly. You don't have to stay," Marcus told her. "This isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't," she replied. "Snow's become part of this community. We protect our own." More colonists arrived throughout the night. Despite Governor Harrison's protests, nearly 50 people showed up with whatever weapons they could find. Miners with plasma cutters, engineers with improvised explosive devices, even the colony's teacher carrying a modified crop harvester that could probably cut through tank armor. Marcus was overwhelmed by their support. These were people who had come to the edge of space looking for new opportunities or fleeing old troubles. They had no obligation to fight for an alien creature they barely knew. But they understood something fundamental about humanity, the willingness to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, regardless of species. Snow seemed to understand what was happening as well. The creature moved among the assembled colonists, touching each one gently with its snout, its musical voice soft and grateful. Several people were visibly moved by the contact, and Marcus realized that Snow was bonding with all of them, creating connections that transcended species barriers. Governor Harrison finally arrived, looking harried and upset. "This is madness," he declared. "We should be evacuating, not preparing for a siege. When the aliens arrive, we should surrender and explain the situation diplomatically." "With respect, Governor," said Elena Vasquez, the head of mining operations, "diplomatic solutions tend to work better when you're negotiating from a position of strength." Snow approached Harrison, studying him with those intelligent eyes. The governor took an involuntary step backward, clearly uncomfortable with the creature's attention. Snow tilted its head, made a soft, questioning sound, then turned away with what could only be described as disappointment. Even the alien could tell that some humans were braver than others. The first sign of incoming ships appeared on long-range sensors just before dawn. 3 contacts, moving faster than anything in human space should be capable of. They would arrive within hours. Marcus gathered everyone in the shop's main bay. Snow stood beside him, no longer the weak, dying creature he'd found in the crater. Its scales had returned to their natural white, but there was a new intensity in its bearing, a readiness for battle that spoke of ancient instincts awakening. "We don't know exactly what's coming," Marcus began, "but we know they're hostile. They tortured Snow with those parasites, probably killed its family, and they're coming here to finish the job. We have 2 choices, run or fight. Anyone who wants to leave should go now, and no one will think less of them." Nobody moved. Snow stepped forward and began to sing. Its voice rose and fell in complex harmonies, weaving together sounds that spoke of courage, unity, and hope. Even those who couldn't understand the alien language felt its meaning. This was Snow's battle song, its gift to the humans who had chosen to stand with it. When the song ended, Elena Vasquez spoke for everyone. "When do we start shooting?" Marcus smiled grimly, feeling something he hadn't experienced since losing his family. The sense of being part of something larger than himself, something worth fighting for. "When they get within range," he said, "and we don't stop until they're gone or we are." Snow's agreement came in the form of a musical trill that sounded remarkably like human laughter. The alien had learned more than language from its time with Marcus. It had learned about human determination and the refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. Outside, the enemy ships continued their approach, confident in their technological superiority and certain of easy victory. They were about to learn why the galaxy would come to remember humanity as the species that didn't know when to quit. The alien ships appeared in Kepler, 442b sky like 3 dark stars, their hull plating absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Marcus watched them through his shop's reinforced window, his modified scanner trying to penetrate their stealth systems. The readings he was getting made no sense. The ships seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, flickering in and out of normal space. Snow stood beside him, its pale eyes fixed on the approaching vessels. The creature's scales had taken on a faint luminescence, and its breathing had become rapid and shallow. Whatever species had built those ships, Snow recognized them and feared them. "Talk to me, Dr. Rodriguez," Marcus said into his comm unit. "What are you seeing from Medical Center?" 3 ships, roughly the size of Earth destroyers, came the reply. "They're running completely silent. No communication attempts, no identification signals. But, Marcus, I'm picking up some kind of energy field around them. It's interfering with our electronics." Marcus nodded grimly. His own equipment was starting to glitch, displays flickering, and sensors giving inconsistent readings. Whatever technology the aliens were using, it was designed to neutralize less advanced systems. Unfortunately for them, human technology had one advantage they probably hadn't counted on. It was built to break down and keep working anyway. "All units, this is Marcus." He transmitted on the colony's emergency frequency. "Remember, our equipment is going to fail. When it does, switch to manual systems and visual targeting. We've been fixing broken machines our whole lives. Now we get to show these aliens what that experience is worth." Snow suddenly stiffened, letting out a low, musical warning that vibrated through the shop's walls. Marcus didn't need a translation. Something was happening. The first sign was the silence. All electronic systems in the colony died simultaneously, from communication arrays to basic lighting. The only things still functioning were the mechanical devices that didn't depend on computerized controls. Then, the ships began their descent. They moved with an eerie grace, their dark hulls seeming to ripple like liquid metal. As they approached the colony, Marcus could make out details that his scanner had missed. The ships weren't just alien, they were wrong, designed according to principles that hurt to look at directly. "Snow," Marcus said softly, "can you understand what they're saying? Are they trying to communicate?" The creature tilted its head, listening to frequencies beyond human hearing. After a moment, Snow began a low, mournful song that needed no translation. The message from the ships was simple: surrender or die. Marcus activated his manually operated communication array, a system he'd built from spare parts that relied on simple radio waves instead of quantum entanglement. "Unknown vessels, this is Marcus Chun, representing Kepler Colony. You're in violation of Terran space. State your intentions or withdraw immediately." The response came not through his radio, but through Snow. The creature suddenly convulsed, its eyes rolling back as alien thoughts invaded its mind. When it spoke, it was in perfect, accentless English. "Human, you harbor our property. Return the youngling to us, and your death will be swift. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why no species has ever successfully opposed the devourers." Snow collapsed, twitching and gasping as the alien presence withdrew from its mind. Marcus knelt beside his friend, helping it recover from the mental assault. "Well," he said grimly, "at least we know where we stand." The first attack came without warning. A beam of sickly green energy lanced down from the lead ship, striking the colony's main power generator. The building didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only a perfect spherical crater filled with some kind of dark energy that hurt to look at. "Weapons free," Marcus shouted into his radio. "All units, engage at will." The colony's response was immediate and chaotic. Plasma cutters designed for mining operations swiveled toward the sky, their brilliant beams reaching for the alien ships. Modified construction equipment launched improvised missiles. Mining charges fitted with guidance systems cobbled together from agricultural drones. Most of their weapons were ineffective against the ship's exotic shielding, but some got through. Elena Vasquez had modified her plasma cutter with components from Snow's crashed ship, and her weapon punched a hole clean through one alien vessel's hull. "Got one," she shouted triumphantly, before her position was obliterated by return fire. Marcus felt his heart clench. Elena had been one of the first to volunteer, one of the bravest people he'd ever known. But there was no time to mourn, the battle was just beginning. Snow struggled to its feet, shaking off the effects of the mental intrusion. The creature looked at Marcus with determination, then began the most complex song Marcus had ever heard. The melody was beautiful, but alien, filled with harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal space. The effect was immediate. The dark energy surrounding the alien ships began to flicker and waver, their stealth systems disrupted by Snow's song. More importantly, the colony's electronic systems began coming back online, freed from whatever interference the aliens had been using. Snow's jamming their jamming. Dr. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the renewed communication system. Whatever that song is, it's leveling the playing field. Marcus grinned fiercely. Humans might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they had something better, friends willing to risk everything to help them fight. The second wave of alien attacks was more focused. Energy beams struck defensive positions one by one, each shot perfectly targeted to inflict maximum casualties. But the colonists adapted with the ingenuity that had kept humanity alive through countless wars. When their fixed defenses were destroyed, they became mobile. Mining vehicles transformed into improvised tanks, their industrial armor proof against all but direct hits. Construction mechs became giant warriors, wielding plasma cutters and magnetic grapples as weapons. Most impressive was the coordination. Without central command, the colonists fought like a pack of wolves, each unit supporting the others in an intricate dance of destruction. When one position fell, others moved to fill the gap. When ammunition ran low, supply teams risked their lives to keep the weapons firing. The aliens had clearly expected quick victory against a primitive species. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding battle against opponents who refused to acknowledge defeat. Marcus and Snow fought from the repair shop, which had become an impromptu command center. Marcus used his technical skills to keep damaged equipment running, while Snow's songs provided crucial intelligence. The creature could somehow sense the aliens' intentions before they acted. Incoming strike on the water treatment plant. Snow's warning came as a musical phrase that Marcus had learned to recognize as urgent danger. All units, defensive fire on Grid 77. Marcus transmitted. Protect the water plant. A dozen weapons swiveled toward the indicated area just as an alien beam lanced down from orbit. The concentrated fire disrupted the attack, sending it off course to strike harmlessly in the desert. But the aliens were learning too. Their attacks became more unpredictable, their targeting more sophisticated. One by one, the colony's defenses were being worn down. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rodriguez had been studying the alien weapon fragments that Snow's song had made available, analyzing them with the medical center's equipment. Her discovery was both horrifying and encouraging. Marcus, you need to hear this. Her voice came through the communication system. The aliens aren't using energy weapons. They're using some kind of life force drainer. The same principle as those parasites that were on Snow. What does that mean for us? Marcus asked, dodging debris as another alien attack struck nearby. It means they're vampires, essentially. They feed on the life energy of other species. But Marcus, Snow's people must have developed defenses against them. That's why Snow can disrupt their systems. Marcus looked at his alien friend, understanding dawning. Snow's species hadn't just been fleeing the Devourers, they'd been fighting them. And losing, but not without learning their enemy's weaknesses. Snow, Marcus said, can your people's weapons hurt them? Can you teach us how to fight back? Snow's response was a complex melody that spoke of ancient knowledge and desperate hope. The creature moved to Marcus's workbench and began sketching diagrams with its claws, showing him how to modify human weapons to disrupt the aliens' life-draining technology. Working together, they began retrofitting the colony's remaining weapons with components from Snow's crashed ship. It was delicate work, requiring a perfect fusion of human engineering and alien science. But Marcus had spent his entire life making incompatible systems work together, and Snow provided the theoretical knowledge he needed. The first modified weapon was Elena's old plasma cutter, now operated by her second-in-command, Jorge Martinez. When he fired it at the nearest alien ship, the result was spectacular. Instead of being absorbed by the ship's shields, the beam punched through like tissue paper, causing a chain reaction that consumed half the vessel. Holy shit, Jorge's voice came over the radio. Whatever you two did to this thing, it works. The tide of battle began to turn. Armed with weapons that could actually hurt their enemies, the colonists went on the offensive. The aliens found themselves facing opponents who not only refused to die quietly, but were actively destroying ships that had seemed invincible just hours before. But the Devourers had one more trick to play. The largest ship, which had remained in orbit throughout the battle, began descending toward the colony. As it approached, its hull began to unfold like some nightmare flower, revealing an interior filled with a darkness that seemed to devour light itself. Snow's reaction was immediate terror. The creature prostrated itself on the shop floor, wings spread in what Marcus recognized as a submission posture. Whatever was in that ship, Snow's species had learned to fear it above all else. "Snow, what is that?" Marcus asked, though he was afraid he already knew. Snow's response was barely a whisper, a musical phrase so quiet and full of dread that Marcus felt his blood freeze. A Devourer Lord, the apex predator of Snow's nightmares, a being that fed not just on life energy, but on the very concept of existence itself. And it was coming down to finish what its subordinates had started. Marcus looked around his shop, at the improvised weapons, the modified equipment, the desperate preparations of a species that had never encountered anything like this before. By all rights, they should surrender now. They should accept defeat gracefully and hope for mercy. Instead, Marcus did what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. He got back to work. "All units, this is Marcus. We've got one more customer coming down for the special treatment. Let's make sure they get everything they deserve." Snow looked up at him with something like awe. Even facing ultimate destruction, the human refused to give up. It was a concept that the creature species had never fully understood, this irrational determination to keep fighting even when logic said defeat was certain. Snow began to sing again, but this time the melody was different. It wasn't a song of fear or desperation, but of hope and determination. The creature was learning from Marcus, discovering that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Together, human and dragon began their final preparations. Whatever happened next, they would face it as they had everything else together. The Devourer Lord's ship descended like a black star, its presence warping reality around it. As it approached, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before, a fundamental wrongness that seemed to attack the very concept of existence. Colors became muted, sounds grew distant, and even his thoughts felt sluggish and unclear. Snow was in agony. The creature writhed on the shop floor, its beautiful white scales flickering between solid matter and something that looked like static interference. The Devourer Lord's presence was literally unmaking Snow's reality, erasing the young dragon from existence one molecular layer at a time. "Hold on," Marcus whispered, kneeling beside his friend. He didn't know how to fight something that attacked existence itself, but he refused to watch Snow fade away without trying. Drawing on instincts he didn't fully understand, Marcus began talking to Snow in the hybrid language they had developed together. He spoke of concrete things, the weight of tools in his hands, the smell of motor oil, the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. Real, physical experiences that anchored both of them to reality. Snow's form solidified slightly, the creature's eyes focusing on Marcus with desperate gratitude. But they both knew this was only a temporary reprieve. When the Devourer Lord's ship landed, even Marcus's stubborn grip on reality wouldn't be enough to save them. "Marcus," Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system, distorted by interference from the descending ship. "I'm reading massive gravitational distortions around that thing. It's not just big, it's dense, like it's pulling matter from other dimensions." Marcus absorbed this information, his mechanical mind already working on the problem. Density meant mass, and mass meant inertia. Even cosmic horrors had to obey some laws of physics. All units, he transmitted, focus everything on the landing zone. Don't try to damage the ship. Just make the ground unstable. Let's see how well their fancy technology works when they can't get solid footing. The colonists responded with desperate ingenuity. Mining charges buried deep in the rock created a network of underground explosions. Plasma cutters carved deep channels in the landing area. Construction mechs dumped tons of loose gravel and mining debris across the site. But the Devourer Lord's ship simply absorbed the obstacles, its hull flowing like liquid around any impediment. When it touched down, the ground beneath it turned to glass, then to some kind of crystalline structure that hurt to look at directly. From the ship's unfolded interior came the Devourer Lord itself. Marcus had expected something dramatic, a giant monster or a being of pure energy. Instead, what emerged was almost anticlimactic in its ordinariness. The Devourer Lord looked like a tall, thin humanoid wearing elaborate robes. It might have been elegant, even beautiful, if not for the absolute wrongness that surrounded it. Where it walked, reality simply stopped working. Plants withered not just to death, but to non-existence, their very concept being erased from the universe. The air itself became uncertain, sometimes breathable and sometimes not, as the fundamental constants that govern matter became suggestions rather than laws. Snow tried to stand, to face its ancient enemy, but the effort nearly killed it. The creature's form was becoming translucent, its song reduced to barely audible whispers. "Snow, don't," Marcus said firmly. "You're not fighting this thing alone." Marcus activated every modified weapon system in his shop simultaneously. Plasma beams, particle accelerators, electromagnetic pulse cannons, all jury-rigged with components from Snow's crashed ship. The barrage that struck the Devourer Lord should have been enough to level a city block. Instead, the energy simply ceased to exist when it touched the alien entity. Not absorbed, not deflected, just deleted from reality as if it had never been fired at all. The Devourer Lord turned its attention to Marcus's shop, and even at a distance of several hundred meters, Marcus felt its influence beginning to work on him. His memories became fuzzy, his sense of identity wavering. Was he Marcus Chun? Or had he always been nobody in particular? Had he ever really existed? Or was he just a dream someone was having? But something anchored him to reality. Snow's song, now so weak it was barely perceptible but still carrying notes of defiance and hope. The dragon was using the last of its strength to keep Marcus real, to maintain his existence in the face of cosmic erasure. Marcus fought back with the only weapon he had left, his stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. "Jorge, Elena, Dr. Rodriguez," he called out to his friends, not caring that some of them were dead. "I need you to remember something for me. Remember that we existed. Remember that we fought. Remember that we didn't give up." His words seemed to have an unexpected effect. The surviving colonists, who had been fading like snow, suddenly became more solid. Their existence stabilized, anchored by shared memory and mutual recognition. The Devourer Lord paused, clearly surprised. No species it had encountered before had been able to resist erasure through simple willpower and friendship. That moment of confusion was all Marcus needed. He had been thinking about the problem backwards. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourer Lord, he needed to make it less real. And he knew exactly how to do it. "Snow," he said urgently, "I need you to sing something for me. Not a song of fear or hope, but a song of repair. Like when I'm fixing a broken machine." Snow looked at him with confusion, but trusted Marcus enough to try. The creature began a hesitant melody, one that spoke of broken things being made whole, of systems restored to proper function. Marcus joined in, not with music but with actions. He began dismantling one of his modified weapons, not to destroy it, but to understand it completely. As he worked, he spoke each component's function aloud, creating a verbal blueprint of how the alien and human technologies interfaced. Other colonists, understanding instinctively what he was doing, began their own projects. Dr. Rodriguez detailed the biological processes that kept humans alive. Jorge explained how his mining equipment transformed raw or into useful materials. Each person became an anchor point for reality, defining and defending the physical laws that the Devourer Lord was trying to erase. The effect was remarkable. Around the colonists, reality became more solid, more definite. The area began to resist the Devourer Lord's influence, creating pockets of normal space-time in the midst of cosmic chaos. The Devourer Lord realized what was happening and began moving toward Marcus's shop with inhuman speed. But its approach was no longer the inevitability it had seemed before. Each step was contested by a reality that refused to be unmade. Snow found new strength in the stabilized space around Marcus. The creature stood, its scales blazing with renewed luminescence, and began the most complex song of its life. It was a song of creation, of existence asserting itself against void, of young dragons learning to fly despite being told it was impossible. Marcus felt the song resonating through every modified component in his shop. The alien technology wasn't just machinery. It was crystallized willpower, devices powered by the determination of Snow's people to continue existing despite cosmic predators trying to erase them. He understood now why Snow's species had been hunted to near extinction. They represented something the Devourers couldn't tolerate, the idea that existence was worth fighting for, that reality was worth defending even against impossible odds. And humans, Marcus realized with growing excitement, were even more stubborn than dragons. All units, he transmitted, we're not trying to kill this thing. We're trying to out-exist it. Keep talking, keep thinking, keep being real as hard as you can. The battle became something unprecedented in galactic history, a philosophical warfare between species that refused to stop existing and entities that specialized in making things not be. The colonists fought with maintenance manuals and repair logs, with detailed explanations of how things worked and why they mattered. They created an expanding bubble of hyperreality around their position, a space where physical laws were not just obeyed but celebrated. The Devourer Lord found itself slowing down, its reality warping abilities contested by sheer, bloody-minded human stubbornness. For the first time in its existence, it encountered something it couldn't simply erase. But the entity had one final tactic. Instead of trying to unmake the humans, it began calling to Snow directly, speaking in the ancient language of the dragons with words that promised an end to fear and pain. Come to us, youngling. The Devourer Lord's voice bypassed normal hearing, speaking directly to Snow's mind. Your suffering can end. Your people's suffering can end. All you have to do is stop fighting. Snow wavered, the temptation almost overwhelming. It would be so easy to simply let go, to accept the peaceful non-existence that the Devourer offered. But then Snow looked at Marcus, at the human who had risked everything to save a dying alien in a crater. Marcus, who was still working frantically on some new modification, still refusing to accept defeat even as cosmic forces tried to erase him from reality. Snow made a choice that would echo through galactic history. Instead of surrendering to the Devourer Lord's call, Snow sang back. Not in the ancient dragon tongue, but in the hybrid language it had developed with Marcus. A song that spoke of friendship across species, of love that transcended biology, of hope that refused to be reasonable. The effect on the Devourer Lord was immediate and devastating. The entity staggered, its form becoming less certain, as if it were forgetting how to exist. The song Snow was singing was literally alien to it, a concept it had no defenses against. The Devourer Lord had spent eons erasing civilizations that fought alone, species that faced extinction in isolation. It had never encountered beings who chose to stand together despite their differences, who created new realities through cooperation and mutual support. Marcus felt the change immediately. The oppressive wrongness that had surrounded the Devourer Lord began to lift, replaced by something new, a sense of possibility that he and Snow were creating together. That's it, he shouted, understanding flooding through him. Snow, keep singing. Everyone else, join in however you can. We're not just fighting this thing. We're creating something it can't understand. The final battle was about to begin, and it would be fought with weapons no military academy had ever taught. Friendship, hope, and the absolute refusal to let the universe become a darker, lonelier place. The sound that rose from Kepler Colony that day was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. Snow's musical voice intertwined with human voices in dozens of languages, creating a harmony that transcended species barriers. Dr. Rodriguez added her medical knowledge as melody, describing the precise mechanisms of cellular regeneration. Jorge contributed the rhythmic patterns of mining equipment, turning industrial sounds into percussion. Even Governor Harrison, who had spent most of the battle hiding in his office, emerged to add his bureaucratic expertise to the strange symphony. They were singing reality into existence, and the Devourer Lord was discovering that some things were too stubborn to be erased. Marcus worked frantically as the improvised choir continued around him, making final adjustments to a device he barely understood. It was part human engineering, part alien technology, and part pure desperate creativity. If his theory was correct, it would do something that had never been attempted before: give the Devourers a taste of their own medicine. The device was a reality anchor, designed to make something so fundamentally real that it couldn't be unmade. But instead of protecting something that already existed, Marcus was using it to create something entirely new. He was making the friendship between human and dragon into a physical force. Snow, he called over the cosmic chaos surrounding them. I need you to remember the first time we talked. Really remember it. Not just the facts, but how it felt. Snow's song shifted, becoming more focused and intense. The memory flowed between them. Marcus's wonder at discovering he wasn't alone in the universe. Snow's desperate hope that finally someone would help. The moment when two entirely different species recognized each other as friends. Marcus fed that memory into his device, using the colony's modified power grid to amplify and broadcast it across all possible dimensions. What emerged was something the universe had never seen before, a weapon powered entirely by the refusal to let friends suffer alone. The beam that struck the Devourer Lord wasn't made of energy or matter. It was made of the concept of friendship itself, crystallized into a force that could reshape reality. The effect on the cosmic predator was immediate and devastating. For eons, the Devourers had fed on isolation, on the despair of species facing extinction alone. They were parasites that thrived on loneliness and fear. But friendship, real, chosen, cross-species friendship, was something their existence couldn't process. The Devourer Lord began to change. Its form, which had been a void in the shape of a being, started becoming more solid, more real. For the first time in its existence, it was learning what it meant to actually exist rather than simply consume existence. It's working, Dr. Rodriguez shouted over the singing. The entity is stabilizing. It's becoming normal. But Marcus could see that the process was far from over. The Devourer Lord wasn't being destroyed. It was being transformed. And that transformation was causing it immense pain as concepts it had never experienced before flooded through its consciousness. For the first time in cosmic history, a Devourer was learning what it felt like to be alive, rather than to simply unmake life. Snow sensed the entity's suffering and did something that surprised everyone, including itself. The young dragon began singing a song of comfort, the same melody it had used when Marcus had first freed it from the parasites. It was offering compassion to the creature that had hunted its people to near extinction. The Devourer Lord staggered, its transformation accelerating. The robes it wore began to change color, shifting from void black to deep purple, then to silver, then to something that resembled Snow's own white scales. The entity was becoming something new, something that had never existed before, a devourer that chose creation over consumption. Why? The transformed being asked, its voice no longer the absence of sound, but a harmony that complemented Snow's song. Why show mercy to one who has brought only ending? Snow's reply came not in words, but in music that spoke of second chances, of the possibility that even the worst mistakes could be forgiven if one was willing to change. Marcus added his own voice to the response. Because that's what friends do. And maybe, if you're willing to learn, you don't have to be our enemy anymore. The transformation completed with a flash of light that made the twin moons seem dim by comparison. When it faded, the being that stood before them bore little resemblance to the cosmic horror that had descended from the stars. It was tall and elegant, with features that suggested both dragon and humanoid ancestry. Most remarkably, its presence no longer erased reality. Instead, it seemed to make everything around it more vivid, more real. "I am confused," the transformed being said, its voice carrying harmonics that reminded Marcus of Snow's song. "For eons, I have known only hunger. But now I feel something else. Is this what you call satisfaction?" "That's one word for it," Marcus replied, still not entirely believing what he was witnessing. "What do you want now? What do you choose to do with this new existence?" The being looked around at the colony, taking in the damaged buildings, the improvised defenses, the humans, and the dragon who had somehow managed to defeat a cosmic force through sheer determination. "I choose to understand," it said finally. "To learn what it means to create rather than consume. Will you teach me?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. Marcus looked at Snow, who tilted its head thoughtfully. The dragon began a soft, questioning melody, asking not just Marcus, but all the colonists, whether they were willing to trust a reformed enemy. The answer came from an unexpected source. Jorge Martinez stepped forward, still carrying his modified mining equipment. "My grandmother used to say that everyone deserves a second chance," he said simply. "Even cosmic horrors, I guess. But you try to hurt anyone here, and we'll show you that humans can be just as creative with destruction as we are with friendship." The transformed devourer nodded solemnly. "I understand. I have much to learn about existence. Perhaps you could help me understand why beings choose to live when ending would be so much simpler." Dr. Rodriguez laughed, the sound carrying relief and exhaustion in equal measure. "Oh, we got plenty of time to explain that. But first, let's all agree to exist in normal space-time for a while. My medical equipment is not designed to treat patients who exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously." Over the following hours, as the colony began to assess the damage and tend to their wounded, an extraordinary conversation took place. The being that had once been a devourer lord, who chose the name Renaissance to mark its transformation, began learning about life from the people it had tried to destroy. Snow proved to be an excellent teacher, sharing not just the musical language of the dragons, but the emotional concepts that made existence worth preserving. Renaissance learned about hope, about the satisfaction of fixing something broken, about the joy of discovering that you're not alone in the universe. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of explaining human mechanics to a cosmic entity. Renaissance was fascinated by the way humans took broken things and made them work again, seeing parallels to its own transformation from destroyer to creator. "Your species possesses a remarkable talent," Renaissance observed, watching Marcus repair a damaged communication array. "You see potential where others see only failure. Is this why you were able to transform me when no other species could?" "Maybe," Marcus replied, tightening a connection that had been loosened by the reality distortions. "Or maybe it's just because we're too stubborn to accept that anything is permanently broken, including cosmic horrors, apparently." Renaissance's laughter was a sound like crystal bells singing in harmony. "I begin to understand why the Devourer fleets fear your kind, Marcus Chun. Not because of your weapons or technology, but because of your refusal to accept that any situation is hopeless. The revelation that there were entire fleets of Devourers still roaming the galaxy cast a shadow over their victory. But Renaissance had a solution for that as well. I retain my connection to the greater swarm," it explained. "I can teach them what I have learned, show them the possibility of existence over extinction. But I will need help. I will need examples of what life can be when it is lived in harmony rather than consumed in isolation. Snow's response was immediate and musical, a song that spoke of new purposes and grand adventures. The young dragon had found its calling, not as the last survivor of its species, but as a teacher and ambassador to beings who had never learned how to truly live. Marcus felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when he first decided to help a dying alien in a crater. "Count me in," he said. "Someone's going to need to keep the equipment running on whatever ship you're planning to use." Governor Harrison, who had been remarkably quiet since emerging from his hiding place, finally spoke up. "This is highly irregular. I'll need to file reports, get authorization from Earth Central Command, establish protocols for interacting with reformed cosmic entities." Governor Dr. Rodriguez interrupted gently. "I think we're a bit beyond normal protocols at this point." Renaissance studied the nervous administrator with something approaching amusement. "Fear not, small bureaucrat. I understand the value of proper documentation. Perhaps you would consent to serve as our official record keeper? Someone must chronicle these events for future generations." Harrison's face brightened considerably. The prospect of being the official historian of first contact with reformed cosmic entities appealed to his orderly mind. And so it was that Kepler colony became the unlikely birthplace of the most unusual partnership in galactic history. A human mechanic, an albino dragon, a reformed devourer, and a collection of miners, doctors, and bureaucrats who had learned that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with the simple refusal to give up on each other. The ship they eventually built was a marvel of hybrid technology. Human engineering providing reliability, dragon artistry creating beauty, and Renaissance's transformed abilities ensuring that it could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously without causing reality distortions. They called it New Harmony, and it became the first vessel designed not for conquest or exploration, but for teaching the concept of friendship to beings who had forgotten how to exist without consuming others. Their first mission took them to the edge of the galaxy, where a devourer fleet was preparing to consume a young civilization that had only recently achieved spaceflight. The battle that followed was unlike any in recorded history. Instead of exchanging weapons fire, they exchanged songs, stories, and mathematical proofs that existence was more satisfying than extinction. By the time they were done, 3 more devourers had chosen transformation over consumption, and an entire species had been saved from erasure. Marcus stood on the bridge of New Harmony, watching Snow teach a group of young devourers how to sing creation songs while Renaissance explained the philosophical implications of choosing to exist. Through the viewports, he could see the planet they had just saved, its cities glowing with the lights of a civilization that would continue to grow and learn. "No regrets?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, joining him at the viewport. She had accepted a permanent position as the ship's chief medical officer, specializing in the treatment of beings who were learning how to exist for the first time. Marcus thought about his old life, the solitude, the grief, the endless cycle of repairing broken machines in a forgotten corner of space. Then he looked at Snow, who was now large enough to carry him on flights through the ship's vast central chamber, and at Renaissance, who was discovering the joy of bad human jokes with the dedication of a scholar studying ancient texts. "Not a one," he said. "Turns out the universe is a lot less lonely when you're willing to make friends with the most unlikely people." Snow's song drifted across the bridge, a melody that spoke of new beginnings and infinite possibilities. It was joined by Renaissance's harmonic resonance and the voices of the newly transformed devourers, creating a symphony that would carry across the galaxy. And somewhere in that music was the simple truth that had started it all. Sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the decision to help someone who needs a friend. The ship New Harmony continued its journey among the stars, carrying its crew of unlikely friends toward their next mission. Behind them, the galaxy was becoming a slightly brighter, slightly less lonely place. Marcus Chun, former mechanic and current ambassador to cosmic entities, couldn't have asked for a better retirement plan.